AITA for telling my neighbor to keep their kids out of my yard? Here's the story. My name's Fergus, and I've been living in this neighborhood for about 10 years now. It's a quiet place, mostly families and retirees, and I thought I knew everyone. That was until the Muirheads moved in next door a few months ago. The Muirheads have 3 kids, all under 10, lively little buggers, always running around, screaming, and playing. At first, I thought it was cute. Who doesn't like the sound of kids having fun? But things quickly escalated. They started treating my yard like their personal playground. One Saturday, I was in my garden, tending to my prized roses, when I heard the familiar sound of children's laughter. I glanced up to see wee Hamish and Fiona sprinting across my lawn, trampling over my flowers. "Oi, what the bloody hell are you doing?" I shouted, unable to hide my frustration. They just giggled and ran back to their own yard. I marched over to the Muirheads' house, fuming. I knocked hard on the door. Fiona, the mother, opened it. "Aye, Fergus, what's the matter?" she asked, clearly taken aback by my expression. "Your kids were just in my yard again, trampling my roses. This has to stop." She looked shocked. "Oh, I'm so sorry. They're just kids, Fergus. They don't mean any harm." "Meaning harm or not, they're destroying my garden. Keep them out, Fiona," I said, trying to keep my temper in check. She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't taking me seriously. Over the next few weeks, things didn't get better. In fact, they got worse. Not only were the kids still playing in my yard, but they started bringing their friends over too. It was like a bloody circus. One evening, after a particularly trying day at work, I came home to find my garden looking like a war zone. Toys were strewn everywhere, and my freshly planted begonias were trampled beyond recognition. I stormed over to the Muirheads' house again. This time, Duncan, the father, answered the door. "Duncan, we need to talk," I said, barely keeping my anger in check. "What's going on, Fergus?" he asked, his face darkening. "Your kids, my yard. It's like a bloody invasion. I've asked Fiona to keep them out, but they're still at it. I can't keep fixing my garden every damn day." Duncan sighed. "I'll talk to them, but you know how kids are. They don't mean any harm." "That's what Fiona said. But harm or not, this has to stop, Duncan. I'm serious." He nodded, but there was a hint of defiance in his eyes. I knew this wasn't over. I decided to take matters into my own hands. If they couldn't keep their kids out, I'd put up a fence to make sure they stayed out. I spent an entire weekend installing a solid wooden fence around my garden. It wasn't cheap, but it was necessary. The following Monday, I heard a knock on my door. It was Fiona, looking livid. "Fergus, what the hell is this?" she demanded, pointing at the fence. "It's a fence, Fiona. Since you can't keep your kids out of my yard, I had to do something." She looked like she was about to explode. "You can't just build a fence without talking to us first." "Actually, I can. It's my property. Maybe if you controlled your kids, this wouldn't be necessary." She stormed off, muttering under her breath. I knew I'd made an enemy, but at least my garden was safe. Or so I thought. A week later, I came home to find graffiti sprayed all over my new fence. Words like grumpy old man and kid hater were scrawled in bright colors. I was furious. I marched over to the Muirheads' house, ready for a confrontation. Duncan opened the door, looking guilty. "What do you want, Fergus? Your bloody kids vandalized my fence. This is too much." He looked at the ground. "I'm sorry, Fergus. I'll talk to them. I'll make them clean it up." "You'd better. And if it happens again, I'm calling the police." The next day, Hamish and Fiona were in my yard with buckets of soapy water, scrubbing the fence under their parents' watchful eyes. I thought that might be the end of it, but I was wrong. One evening, I heard a loud crash from my backyard. I ran outside to find a football had smashed through my greenhouse window. The Muirhead kids stood there, looking terrified. "That's it," I bellowed. "Get out and don't come back!" Their parents came running. "What happened?" Fiona asked, panic in her voice. "Your kids broke my greenhouse window with their football." Duncan looked furious. "All right, that's it. We're done here. Kids, inside." They left, and I spent the evening cleaning up broken glass, seething with rage. The next morning, I went to the local council to file a formal complaint against the Muirheads. Enough was enough. Update. So, after filing the complaint, the council sent a letter to the Muirheads warning them to keep their kids out of my yard or face a fine. They weren't happy, but it worked. The kids stopped coming over, and I finally had some peace. A few weeks after the council's warning, the Muirheads put their house up for sale. I overheard them talking about how they couldn't live next to that grumpy old man anymore. They moved out by the end of the month. The new neighbors are an elderly couple, very quiet and respectful. My garden has never looked better. Sometimes I feel a bit guilty about driving the Muirheads away, but I don't regret standing up for myself, my yard, my rules.